Coming to critical and creative thinking, we may want now to talk about deductive and inductive reasoning, and we go more of a summary, and you can see the way people have looked at it. Think of this gentleman, Brian Skims, a distinguished professor of logic and philosophy of science and economics at the University of California, and a professor of philosophy at Stanford University. He has worked on problems in the philosophy of science, causation, decision theory, game theory, and foundations of probability. And lately, his work focused on the evolution of social norms using evolutionary game theory. Some of the books include the evolution of the social contract and the stag hunt, all that. At the time of writing his book, Choice and Chance, Brian Skims was teaching at the University of Michigan. And the main reason for including him in this topic, dealing with deductive and inductive reasoning, is to correct a common misconception in the branch of philosophy called logic, that the difference between deductive and inductive arguments is that deductive arguments proceed from general premises to particular conclusions, and inductive arguments proceed from particular premises to general conclusions. We are going to see these things in a short while and draw a few examples, though you may find the same characteristics. Skims correct this misconception by way of examples and seeks to demonstrate that both deductive and inductive arguments can proceed from general premises to general conclusions, from particular premises to general conclusions, from general premises to particular conclusions, and from particular premises to particular conclusions. He goes on to demonstrate that the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning is largely the difference in degree of strength of the evidential link between the premises and conclusions. Now, let us look at the two of them. We will not get details because there is still a lot you can go through. Now, deductive reasoning, what is it? First, it starts from general to specific. So those are some of the things Brian may be trying to counter, okay? That the difference between the deductive, let me go back there, and inductive argument is that deductive arguments proceed from general premises to particular conclusions. This is what he is countering, but let's also assume he has not spoken and go to the traditional method. Just ignore him a bit, but we'll come back to him. Ranjere, although he's disputing this, there's a sense in which at times it is that way. It is what he's disputing. And let us just take this example. Deductive. I trying to explain that what you call deductive or inductive reasoning is also the same as deductive or inductive logic. So here, logic and reason, they're supposed to be the same. They are synonymous. And so, when we want to draw an argument, because we are about to study the argument, today is a day of argument. How do you develop an argument? Even when you are writing an essay, a term paper, there should be a good argument. Argument should not be anything but good argument, logical argument, either deductive or inductive. For us in human sciences, we deal with more inductive than deductive. We'll see this. First, deductive reasoning, also deductive logic or logical deduction, or informally top-down logic, is the process of reasoning from one or more general statements to reach a logically certain conclusion. It links premises with conclusions. If all premises are true, the terms are clear, and the rules of deductive logic are followed, then the conclusions the conclusion reached is necessarily true. Let us look at the example there. A practical example is put there. An example of a deductive logic is all human beings are mortal. First premise. Second premise, John Otieno is a man. Conclusion, therefore, John Otieno is mortal. So you can see that traditionally it starts from general to specific. Brian Schemes is trying to dispute this and giving us another idea where he has a very good argument, but we are trying to say in some cases you cannot isolate the old theory that deductive reasoning starts from general. Even as when we use deductive reasoning, when you are writing thesis, you are writing about Mau Mau War in Kirinyaga, as I did for my PhD in history. I wrote on Mau Mau in Kirinyaga County. And to start from the general historicity of Kimathi, Wachiori, the Mau Mau formation, the Second World War, how it came. That's the general information to gather the background. Okay? And it looks nice when you are in doing in your human sciences to broaden. Even those friends of mine who are in English literature, when we talk to them, those who are writing even those novels, when you read a book by this South African humanist scholar, or even the British humanist scholar by name Charles Dickens and his Hand Times, you see, you have to capture the history of Industrial Revolution in order to understand the novel. How James Blackpool falls in a pit as he was passing without knowing that those who were digging for gold, as people were rushing to be very rich and capitalistic, they did not cover the holes. So somebody would fall, relatives don't know where he is. He doesn't come back. He fell because of these greedy people who are digging for minerals. They will not tell you that there is a hole. They will not cover with anything. As you are walking oblivious of the hole they are in, you fall under and you die there. You stay there for 4 days, 5 days, 8 days without eating and you are already injured. You die there in the hole. So those are the things that were happening after Industrial Revolution. So you cannot know unless you go general to specific. Then from there you come now from the general world war affairs and comparing with those Philippine movements, sometimes the Indian wars of independence. You may require a broader generic starting point to show, to conceptualize the matter. Even them, they can't avoid, many people in humanities cannot avoid history in order to build a broader base, in order now to narrow down to what they have. Brian Schemes is not totally wrong, but we are trying to say that in an argument, for it to flow, it has to start somewhere. But that is not the major point. The major point in my view is in deductive reasoning, you don't entertain probability. There's no probability here. All humans are mortal. John Otieno is a man. Therefore, John Otieno is a mortal. There is no probability. But in this other one we are getting into, because I'll let you go into it in details. I just want you to know what it is all about, because there are quite a number of issues we may have to cover. We may not have all the time to cover everything. This one, I bring it here. It allows you to bring without, and this is the one I said favors humans as more human scientists than even these mathematicians who may, okay, we use both also, but physical scientists may prefer this more than human scientists. Now, coming to this other one, you see how it is. Let me give the example. Almost all people are taller than 26 inches. Juma is a person. Premise 2. Premise 1. Almost all people are taller than 26 inches. premise 2, Juma is a person. Therefore, Juma is almost certainly taller than 26 inches. I don't want to get to the biological example. I just want to use one and make it so simple. Not so inductive is a bit probabilistic. That is one thing you can't deny. It only states that given the premises, the conclusions is probable. Okay? And this other one, deductive, where a mathematician would want to be there more, it has no room. Although we use both, this is more for physical scientists. It has no room for probability. If you are doing, for example, you are counting figures, money, for example, you don't say probably. Auditors want you to tell us exactly how much you spent, or something of the sort. So inductive reasoning, as opposed to deductive reasoning, is reasoning in which the premises seek to supply strong evidence for and not absolute proof of it, of the truth of the conclusion. While the conclusion of a deductive argument is supposed to be certain, the truth of an inductive argument is supposed to be probable based upon the evidence given. I said a historian can say when Vasco da Gama came here and put a probability around 1497, 1498. That will not affect the whole picture. But if you err in scientific figures, that will be a big issue because you cannot correct it. It can be real problems. Now, if you look there, inductive versus deductive reasoning. Unlike deductive arguments, inductive reasoning allows for the possibility that the conclusion is false, even if all of the premises are true. Instead of being variant or invariant, inductive arguments are either strong or weak, which describes how probable it is that the conclusion is true. A classical example of an incorrect inductive argument was presented by John Vickers. He said this: all of the swans we have seen are white. Therefore, all swans are white. This is incorrect. Now, note that this definition of inductive reasoning excludes mathematical induction, which is a form of deductive reasoning. So what we are saying is, if, for example, the conclusion, if you start poorly, if you start with the wrong premise, you may have the wrong conclusion or the wrong answers. So you must ensure that the first premise is correct. Almost all people are taller than 26 inches. If you err here, the first premise in an argument, you lose the argument. And that is what we find even in courts of law, where they talk about BBI is good or bad. If the first premise has issues, there is a lot of charges in the entire argument. Let me just mention abductive reasoning. Abductive reasoning. Abductive reasoning was recognized as such only in the late 19th century by Charles Sanders, though there are instances of it through antiquity or those other years. It is now the most common form of argument in the sciences, for it involves the postulation of theories which explain some event or regularity. Now, the form of an inference to the best explanation differs from that of deductive or inductive argument, though confusingly the same indicator ones are used. In an abduction or abductive reasoning, the conclusion is some event or regularity which needs to be explained, or the premises are the theories or sets of conditions which do the explaining. That said, the word why is used much more frequently in explanations. Hence, the word why can be used to distinguish abductions from other forms of argument. Now, the most common form of an inference to the best explanation is the reason why is because and. That is an inference or abductive reasoning. The reason, you hear somebody talking that language, the reason why is because and. In other words, abductive arguments do not have characteristic key ones other than explains and why. The only way to distinguish between an inductive or deductive argument and an abduction is to determine whether the conclusion is a fact, in which case it is an abduction, or an opinion, in which case it is a deductive or inductive argument. It is important to watch for hanging ones who are making this distinction. So the issue here is the way we use inferences, inferring, from the English word inferring, okay, using ones to push others to get the others right. The reason why is because, and this inference therein. There is also something we call errors of reasoning. There's error in reasoning. Error in reasoning, we call it deductive errors. There are two ways a deductive argument can fail. One, when the premises may be false, or two, the conclusion may not follow from the premises. Students often attempt that method of evaluation, arguing directly against the conclusion. While this is around, it amounts to ignoring the argument in favor of the conclusion, and hence it is never decisive. Okay? In general, premises are shown to be false by showing that their contradictories are true. Here are some common contradictions. Number one, all A are B contradicts some A is not B. 2. No A are B contradicts some A is B. If A then, number 3, if A then B contradicts A and not B. All those are called deductive errors. When you miss out somewhere, either in the conclusion or the premise or premises, the argument has errors. There's also inductive errors. Where are they? All inductive arguments base their success on the similarity between the objects or events described in the premises and those described in the conclusion. And this is most clear in the case of an analogy. And so we turn to the first error of inductive reasoning. First analogy, for example. The two things being compared are not similar in a way which is relevant to the conclusion. For example, suppose someone argued, an employee is like a nail. Just like a nail, an employee must be hit in the head in order to get him to work. This argument may be criticized by showing that employees are not like nails, in that, one, incentive will not persuade a nail to work, but they will persuade employees to work, and number two, a nail won't resent being hit, but an employee will fight. If you hate an employee who is not working hard because he's demoralized, he may fight you. So you see, when you have these are called inductive errors, and they are there. And now when they reach this level, we move to another vocabulary, which we will consider, and I just want to jump there. We are going to call it fallacies. They are now formal and informal fallacies. The one I want to underline is fallacies. I just wanted, because there's repetition here, I just now want to get to the argument, because there is quite a number of repetition you can follow. So, arguments. Back to argument, because we are still in the same topic. In logic and philosophy, an argument is an attempt to persuade someone of something by giving reasons for accepting a particular conclusion as evident. In a typical deductive argument, the premises are meant to provide a guarantee of the truth of the conclusion. While in an inductive argument, premises are thought to provide reasons supporting